Less than 2 years after the release of The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, we saw the release of Majora's Mask, a strange departure from its predecessor. This entry is widely known for its dark themes, heavy story, and unique gameplay. At the time of this video's release, Majora's Mask released 20 years ago, on April 27, 2000 in Japan. It released about 6 months later in North America on October 26th. After the huge success that was The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, which sold 7 million copies worldwide, director Eiji Aonuma said they were faced with the very difficult question of just what kind of game could follow Ocarina of Time. In an Iwata Asks interview, Aonuma tells Satoru Iwata how he was tasked with making the 64DD Master Quest expansion for Ocarina of Time. Miyamoto tasked him with repurposing the existing dungeons to create a challenge for those who completed the original game. Aonuma began instead making new dungeons in secret as he couldn't get into redesigning his existing dungeons because he felt they were already as perfect as they could be. Eventually, Aonuma worked up the courage to ask Miyamoto if he could move forward with making a completely new game instead. Miyamoto agreed on the condition that the game be made in just 1 year's development time. To compare, Ocarina of Time took about 3 years to develop, and Majora's Mask was only given the 1. The concept of the time cycle came by inspiration of the Sun Song from Ocarina of Time. Aonuma explained the use of the song to move between day and night inspired a way to create depth in a game without spreading the game too wide. The assets from Ocarina of Time would be used to save time, the character models, etc. So, while in the world of Termina is relatively small, the amount of stuff to do makes it reach far deeper than the open, relatively empty Hyrule field of its predecessor. The idea to use masks was also inspired by Ocarina of Time. The mask mechanic was not fully realized, and the team found that the mask salesman and the masks could make for some fun gameplay mechanics to enhance. Rather than just having characters react differently to seeing the masks on Link, having him instead completely transform into characters. Aonuma says, once we decided we were going with masks, everything else fell into place. Initially, the time set would be a week's time. However, as development continued, it was ultimately decided that a week was far too long to be able to remember all details and changes from day to day. Aonuma explained that 3 days felt just right, and the development of Majora's Mask continued from there. So, after 20 years, does Majora's Mask hold up? Or, does it stand the test of time? In Majora's Mask, we see Link as he's left Hyrule after the events of Ocarina of Time, in search of a lost friend, which is highly inferred to be Navi the Fairy, and later confirmed by Hyrule Historia. After having the Ocarina and Epona stolen by the Skull Kid, we get a taste of the level of maturity that Link has. He does these flips as he goes from stump to tree stump. Maybe this is just cosmetic, but I think it clearly shows that he's done this sort of thing before. Before long, Link catches up to the Skull Kid, and the gameplay completely shifts. We move from the gameplay that we'd become accustomed to some bizarre form, a Deku. Right away, we're met by the happy mask salesman, who has to leave town in 3 days. Clearly he knows something that Link doesn't. But he offers to transform you back into your real self in exchange for getting the Majora's Mask back to him. Easy enough, right? As you enter the big doors into Clocktown, we see the foreboding moon above, and the people going about their day. The music is lighthearted, which is completely opposite of where we just came from. The dark tunnels, the foggy woods, and the only direction that we're given by Tattle is to find the Great Fairy. The town is yours to explore. Clocktown serves as a great tutorial in the first 3-day cycle. You really feel the sense of urgency to try to accomplish as much as possible. As you search for the Great Fairy, you're likely to come upon the Bombers. Finding each of them earns you the code to access the observatory and progress. However, they do not let you become a member of their club because you're a Deku. So right away, we're already seeing a disadvantage of not having our natural Link form. Guards keep you from leaving town, you get a peek at Termina Field from the observatory, but you can't access it. You have 3 entire days just to roam Clocktown, meet the people, and learn more about them. You learn how to blow bubbles from your mouth? Nose? What is this thing? I don't even know. Anyway, And that amazing spin dash attack that gives you momentum from lily pad to lily pad later on. Man, I love that move. As the days progress, you continue to feel the Deku form become a hindrance. As the game progresses, you gain back your human form. The Deku mask actually becomes a way to progress. It helps you navigate the southern swamp, cross poisonous waters, and attack flying enemies. This ability to hinder and allow progression really makes the Deku mask one of my favorites in the game. The biggest thing for me though is hearing the music change from day to day. It becomes more urgent, more characters are taking notice of the moon drawing ever closer to them. They actually react. This town is a living and breathing place and everyone has a schedule. It's really remarkable to see after the game has had such a short development cycle, become so alive. Being directly under the moon's path for the first day cycle really adds to the intensity of this story. You can't progress until you're able to finally climb to the top of the clock tower at midnight on the last night, when the game is at its most intense. The town is mostly deserted by this point. People are fleeing for their lives. The ability to change forms by masks really sets this game apart from the rest. Each character, the Goron, Zora, Deku, all offer different abilities to enhance gameplay. This really rounds out the gameplay in a unique way that we really don't see in any other Legend of Zelda games. Swimming at a rapid speed with Zora Link is probably the most satisfying feeling though. We're not going to talk about the 3DS version of this because frankly I just think it's terrible. I'm looking at you, 3DS Zora Swim. Yeah, it's pretty bad. The weaker part of the game has to be its dungeons. Now, the game only has 4 main dungeons compared to Ocarina of Time's 8, and they're not necessarily hailed as the greatest in the Zelda series, but the best in Majora's Mask definitely has to be Stone Tower Temple. And I know that's a pretty common opinion amongst Zelda fans, but the mechanic of being able to flip the environment to traverse the dungeon deeper is something that we hadn't really seen anything like that until this point. It almost makes it feel like two completely different places at times. Now, I don't mind the other dungeons, but I'd never say I'm dying to replay them again. Snowhead Temple is so punishing if you miss one of the jumps or fall down. You end up having to climb so far just to get back to where you were, it can be a real drag. Especially if you're in the dungeon on day 3. Nothing is worse than having to finish that dungeon when it's 11 at night on the 3rd day. I've definitely had to do this way too many times. The bosses themselves are pretty fun for the most part, and being able to utilize the transformative masks to attack each of them is a good way of implementing the new gameplay mechanics. The Stone Tower boss is the only place to really use the Giant's Mask, which is a little weird to me, but it's still a pretty fun boss battle regardless. Going back to dungeons, I think I need to give an honorable mention to Ikana Castle. The music gets me every time. I just love it. Going through a creepy, ruined castle in Ikana just fits Terminus so well, and the boss at the very end fighting the king and his 2 minions is just great. So maybe I'm in the minority here, but I think Ikana Castle could have been its own dungeon. The music alone. So good. So good. Where this game really shines is in its side quests. The Bomber's Notebook gives players a way to keep track of the people in Termina and what their schedules are. Helping resolve issues, learning more about these characters, we really do start to care about them. Even the simple task of stopping the thief from stealing bombs rewards you with a highly useful bomb mask. It's in the side quest that we really start to see the differences between the 3 days, and the Bomber's Notebook really comes in handy here. Trying to learn schedules, finding out where people are each day, gives that extra layer of depth that the time mechanic allows for in Majora's Mask. The greatest use of this mechanic in my eyes is the Anju and Cafe quest. It takes place over each and every day. There are always places to be, people to talk to, and you have to know where to find them. And you have to meet Cafe and Anju in specific places, and it really makes for good story, and it takes a good memory. Other quests include warding off the bomb thief, helping calm a Goron infant, and reuniting a frog choir, which is definitely the worst side quest in my opinion. It's just a pain in the butt. That's all I'm gonna say about that one. But if you fail any of the portions of these time-sensitive quests, you're gonna have to start the time cycle over and go back to day 1. Punishing? Definitely. But you're almost guaranteed to remember what your mistake was, and next time you'll probably not make that same mistake again. Now, I couldn't finish this video without talking about going onto the moon itself. Now, at the end of the game, you go sucked up into the mouth of the moon. Why it has a mouth in the first place, I'm not really sure, but we'll roll with it. It almost looks like some sort of utopia on the moon. At a closer look, though, there's these creepy little kids running around wearing the masks of the bosses that you defeated earlier. Now, the mini-dungeons that these characters allow are a great motivation for you to go through the entire game and make sure you get each and every mask available. The reward for doing so is just way satisfying. The Fierce Deity mask is just so epic. While I do think it makes the final battle against Majora a bit too easy, as a completionist, I just have to go for it every time. I can't help it. Seeing Link again, as an adult basically, is just too cool. The battle against Majora is pretty good. It goes through multiple phases, getting bigger and creepier, minus this weird cross-country version that's screaming and just kind of weird overall. Definitely not the most challenging final boss in the Zelda series, but it's still a good one. The game has its issues, but what it lacks in size, it makes up for that in depth. Aonuma and his team made the best of the 1 year that they were given to create a story that's just unforgettable. I think this game has stood the test of time and is highly worth picking up and playing. I, myself, love this game. It's one of my favorites in the series, and I hope you enjoy it as well. But what do you guys think of Majora's Mask? Let me know down in the comments what your favorite parts are, what your least favorite moments are, whatever it may be. I want to know your thoughts on Majora's Mask. And until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.